Hello, class. I decided to analyze the data pertaining to the state of U.S. education in 2015 that was on the instruction sheet. Um, so some standards that this problem pertains to are NC.M4.SP.1, which is a Math 4 standard, which reads, create statistical investigations to make sense of real-world phenomena. So, this is real world phenomena. It basically analyzes different states where they are on the US and expenditure per student, average salary, um, all these things, number of grads, blah, blah, blah. And it also gives you a nice little map. Um, so you can like click and it'll highlight the data. So another standard is NC.M4.SP.2, which is also a Math 4 standard. It states apply informal and formal statistical inferences to make sense of and make decisions in meaningful real-world contexts. Basically, that's what you're doing in this task. You are plotting different graphs, trying to find relationships between data using least squares lines, finding means to decide where you want to teach. Look at things like the average salary, expenditure per student, things like that. This technology use illustrates best practices because this problem asks you to take all the sets of data and create sense of them by graphing them alone and with each other. So yeah, as you can see, I created some graphs that I will get to later and explain why I did it. But these are all, and with the map, it makes it a lot easier because you can highlight states and get those alone. So you can highlight North Carolina and see that we're on the low end of a lot of things. So that's something cool that you can do. It really helps visualize the data. It also asks you to statistically infer which region would be best for teaching, which is very applicable to real life. You could also form a least squares line between two variables, check for relationships, which is what I did here, which helped me see that there aren't many, the strongest relationship, well, there aren't really many like relationships between the things that I looked at. So the reason I did these graphs right here is because the test asks plot different quantitative data against each other and figure out like which place would be the best for teaching. So I did average salary in census region first and found out that like in the Northeast the mean is much higher. But if you look at like the outliers, like over here, California gets paid really high, New York gets paid really high. The reason that these are so inflated is because the cost of living there can also be really inflated. So it's kind of deceptive to just look at average salary. You got to make sure you separate the region and really check where these states are because chances are the cost of living is going to be higher. Whereas Mississippi, it's really low, but the cost of living in Mississippi is not nearly as high as living in New York. So I decided to plot average salary versus number of high school grads to see if as the salary gets higher, the number of high school grads goes up, which I would assume would happen, but it doesn't really. There isn't really much of a relationship here. I mean, there's a very slight relationship, but as you can see, there's a huge outlier here. A lot of this does not fit the line. So I decided to look at students per teacher versus number of teachers. Again, not much of a relationship here. I thought it would be like if there were more teachers, there'd be more students per teacher. So it would, I mean, there'd be less students per teacher. But I guess, it's population, so maybe that's not a correct thing to assess. And then I did average salary versus expenditure per student to find a relationship. Again, there's not really much. I mean, there is a little bit, but it's not very strong. So yeah, that's basically this task. It's a good task to start graphing things against each other, but things I graphed against each other just didn't really give me much of a story, and I think that it may be slightly because, or at least like partly because, the salaries of teachers generally have to do with, like they pertain to the cost of living in that area. So every job is going to have an inflated salary, and it seems great, but that's going to get you nowhere in that state. Um, so it may be better. It would be better if there was like an average cost of living column to put that salary into perspective. So yeah, that's this task. I really like it. I think it'd be great for high school students, especially high school students that are interested in teaching in high school, to really get an idea of where would be the best places to teach.